Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Grill Nation Show. Thank you for joining us on live stream or via podcast. My name is Jason Grill. I'm your host. Appreciate you joining us again this week. We're going to have a great conversation today with a very intriguing guest. But before we get to our guest, I want to bring on Jeff Phillips, who is the Senior Vice President at Landmark National Bank. The website is banklandmark.com. Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for hosting me again.
Yeah, it's great to see you, sir. I know you're a busy man. Before we get to our guest, I want to obviously touch on some really exciting things that are happening within the bank. Let's talk about that first. I know there's been a recent acquisition, correct?
Yeah, we're really excited. This has been in the works for quite a while, and we made it official, I think, on midnight on Friday night. But we were happy to welcome the team from Freedom Bank, which is a great business-centric bank in South Johnson County primarily. But we are kind of working together now, and that's fun because they bring great ideas to the table, and we feel like we have some good ideas. But one thing that we have in common is really kind of having a laser focus in on owner operators, so folks that are in their business, running their business, and that kind of presents a unique set of needs, and them having experience with that and us having experience with that, we can really kind of lean on each other for what has worked well and how we've been able to help friends and customers over the years. So I'm really excited about what it means. It's introducing us to some new folks, honestly, that we didn't know in the marketplace with great businesses. I mean, there's a lot of great businesses in Kansas City, and while I would like to pretend like I know all of them, I don't. But so we're meeting a lot of new folks, and but we talked about it before, Jason. We really try to hold out values as being our driving force about people that want to do business with us or be part of our team, kind of have these same shared values, and I can easily say that this crew shares those same values.
How long of a process was that, Jeff?
Yeah, it's there's a whole kind of industry around banks being purchased and sold, and there's financial information, and there's certain amounts that are traded at certain times, and always those have to be done and confidentially and all of that. So it can take a very long time or not a very long time. But then also, kind of once you agree to terms with somebody, and this isn't specific to ours, this is just kind of in general. Once you agree to terms with somebody, then of course we're a highly regulated industry, so you have to get approval, on that front too from regulators. And so there's a lot of process around it, and I won't even pretend to act like I know about all the computer pieces that go into it too, about making sure that their accounts talk to our accounts and all those type of things. But it's quite a process, so it can be a short amount of time or a long time, but this one I felt like went pretty smooth.
That's great to hear. Let's talk about some hot topics. What is going on with the economy right now, Jeff? I know you wanted to update us on that as well.
Yeah, well, I'm a viewer of the economy just like anybody else, where I see what happens in the stock market, or I'm reading the Wall Street Journal, and you kind of have these global things or these macroeconomics that you read about, but then also there's the micro of what we're seeing here in Kansas City. And so really probably what I can speak to most directly is about what we're seeing in Kansas City. And there are some challenges in front of business owners. There are still a lot of needs on the labor side. There's still cost fluctuations that make it a little hard to forecast. But to be real honest with you, I feel like every conversation we're having is around smart business people saying, okay, if this is the reality that I'm dealing with, here's what I need to do for my business to do well, and for my team to grow, and for us to feel like we are actually accomplishing something and achieving a purpose. So I feel like good business owners are kind of always thinking that way. So having kind of these new variables introduced is not really knocking them off their game. It's just kind of heightening their focus in on what levers they need to pull within their business to make it successful. So, occasionally I feel like you, me, John, we all have to kind of lean on each other, because occasionally we'll have down days, right? Where you're just, man, it's hard. Or,
Yeah.
I got not good news today with this one customer, or with this, I got, a resignation or whatever. And I think we just kind of have to lean on each other to say, yeah, that stinks. And I'm sorry that happened, but kind of, help each other through those, to talk about what all the good things are, because I think those greatly outweigh kind of the challenges we're facing right now.
Well said. Jeff Phillips with us, Senior Vice President of Landmark National Bank. Jeff, who are we going to have on the show today?
Yeah, so I'm excited for today. We're going to have John Galloway. He's the founder and leader of 40 North, which is a internationally recognized and super successful landscaping design group. It's kind of funny. Kansas City is one of those cities where you can have people that may be more well known outside of Kansas City than they are in Kansas City. So John has a great group of friends and has worked on great projects in town, but I think he will probably tell us that he probably has more exposure nationally and internationally than he does in Kansas City. We got introduced to each other through some mutual acquaintances, his family as well, and of his. And we just really kind of struck up a quick friendship. He's from rural Kansas. I'm from rural Oklahoma. We're both readers. Family is super important to John. I can remember walking down to his office at the Livestock Exchange building in the historic West Bottoms the first time, and immediately liked him, which is probably what has happened with every single person that has met John along the way. So I'm excited to hear from him today about what's going on in his business, kind of some of the opportunities that he's taken as a business leader. It'll be great.
Mm-hmm. Can't wait to talk to John. I think he's going to have a lot of books in his background too. So
he's a reader.
He is a reader. Before we get to John, I just want to let everyone know they can connect with me on social media, on Twitter at Jason Grill and at Grill Nation Show. Also, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Jason Grill. Thank you for connecting with me as always. And you can find all of our shows on Apple Podcasts or on Stitcher, as well as on YouTube, where there's full-length videos of every one of our shows. Appreciate everyone listening today. And let's now bring on John Galloway from 40northdesign.com. The company is named 40 North. The website, again, is 40northdesign.com. John, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Hey, how are you, Jason? Thanks for having me on. Jeff, that was an intro. I need to hire you, my PR guy. That was really great. It really was.
John, before we get to your company, let's hear about you. Tell us about your background and your journey, kind of, and tell us, as long as you want to go on this, it'd be great. But how did you get to where you are today? Jeff said you're from rural Kansas. Let's talk about kind of your background growing up in this area and kind of where you're at now.
An open live mic and somebody asked me to tell them a story is dangerous. Well, I guess I would start by saying I'm a Kansan first and foremost. As Jeff said, I come from Western Kansas. I grew up in Trigo County, Kansas. Waukeeny, Kansas is the town. I can't tell you how many people a year send me photographs from I-70 of either the exit or of the advertising out there for the community, which is Waukeeny, it's affordable, was their slogan for about 10 years. So yeah, and it's, I grew up out there, and my brother Lewis and I always tell people that we're fifth generation Western Kansas ranchers, and that's the truth. We had grandfathers and grandparents that pioneered out there, 1870s, and we have a lot of pride in Western Kansas. It's one of those places I go to where immediately I feel comfortable and at home, and I'm still invited back. So I love to go out there and visit with a lot of the people there in the community, and it's a special place. From there, I went to Kansas State and their School of Landscape Architecture. Really had a great 5 years there in Manhattan. Actually extended it to 6. Took a year off and went to Maryland for an internship, for a year-long internship with a company called Land Design Research. And land architecture is one of those things where my uncle Jack, his name is actually John Galloway. He's my dad's brother, and is a landscape architect. went to Kansas State, and some of the professors that I had, he had. So to be honest with you, it was kind of challenging to go to school there, because Jack, he worked for the National Park Service for 40 years. And he was, at 10 years old, he was one of those guys that I really looked to kind of emulate or try and be like. He's my dad's brother. This is Uncle Jack. And so that's what really made me want to get into landscape architecture. So came back to Kansas State and got recruited actually to a company in Florida. It's a company called EDSA. It was founded by a man named Ed Stone Jr. In 1960, and it was one of those things where I met him at a national landscape architecture convention. They had this student design competition, and I entered a board. This is pre-internet, pre-digital age, so it was a 30-inch by 40-inch board that was basically a collage of photographs and plans and drawings and writing, and it was just that one board. And I won this national design competition and met Mr. Stone on stage. He gave me the award, and he basically told me that he had heard that I was going to go work on the East Coast in Maryland for this company, that he was friends with the founders. And he said, you don't want to go work for those guys. That's just boring. You need to come to Fort Lauderdale and come work for me. He goes, we're going to design resorts. I'm going to send you around the world. You're going to get a draw, and I'm going to pay you. So
sounds like a good opportunity.
It was amazing. Yeah, it really was a great opportunity. And, so a couple weeks later, in the middle of a eastern Kansas snowstorm, I got a phone call, and somebody from EDSA invited me to come down and interview. So it was snowing outside, and thought, a ticket to Fort Lauderdale for a few days sounded pretty good. So I rolled up all my drawings. This is, again, pre-digital age. Rolled up this huge thing of drawings and went to Fort Lauderdale and sat in this conference room. And immediately when I landed, it was palm trees and cold beers and pretty girls, and I was hooked. And they knew what they were doing. So they made, long story short, I spent a few days down there. I interviewed in this room, and all these people came through. A lot of the partners and people that were working at the company came through and looked at my drawings, and they made me an offer. And my first salary was $27,500 a year, and I held out for $28,500. I really felt like that extra $1,000 was critical.
Nice work.
Go ahead.
Nice work. Good job.
Yeah, I spent 10 years down there, and they showed me a world that I didn't know existed. They literally, within about a month of working there, I was in South Africa, never been outside of the country until then. It was just one of those magical things where when you start to travel, it's just the world kind of opens up to you, and you start meeting people and talking to them and realizing that, yeah, things are different and people are all different, but there's much more things in common between us than different. So I was hooked on that and worked there for 10 years and just had a great time. I really did.
That's awesome. How did you transition to Florida to owning your own business, 40 North?
Well, so after 10 years there, literally Katie, my beautiful wife,
Did you meet her in Florida?
Well, I met her actually at Louise's West in Lawrence one night. Like in 99 or 98. I had been out of college. My brother Lou and friends were going to school there. And I met her just briefly there. And then maybe it was right before Y2K. We went to a dinner. My brothers and I went to a dinner in Denver. And I looked at the end of the table, and this beautiful girl. I didn't recognize her from previously. And we were married 9 months later. It was one of these things where, I actually brought her to Florida. I stole her away from a really amazing finance job in Denver, and she was just the hottest, craziest, smartest girl I could imagine. And I still feel the same way. It's 21 years now. So, but she came down there, and after she came, the reason why I mentioned her is we had been married 5 years, and she told me she was pregnant, and so I literally couldn't sleep that night. Woke up at 4 a.m, drafted a resignation letter and went in at 7:30 in the morning the next day and handed this to this mentor of mine, Bob Bailing, and told him that I was out in 3 months. Labor Day, I was gone.
Wow.
It only took 2 months before they fired me because I had these really great guys in my studio that were working with me, and it was kind of like Johnny's leaving. I think he was afraid others would go with me, but so I started my company 17 years ago in August of 2005. And
what made you make that decision to resign when you were having a baby? Most people just say, I need more financial independence. You were like, I want to start my own company.
Well, yeah. Well, no, I knew I had 9 months. I had 9 months to do what I knew I needed to do. And I looked around at most of the older guys in the firm that, guys that were 10 years older than me. Not that I didn't have respect for them, but I knew that I was never going to be this career guy at this amazing company. That there have been many other talented designers and great people come through that company and gone off and started their own companies. So, including my boss, Bob. He, the whole 10 years I worked for him, I traveled with him all over the world for forever, and we had long conversations about how he got to where he was. And I'm a generally inquisitive person. So, one of the things he told me was that he was at EDSA 5 years, and then he left to start his own company back in his home state of Utah. And so I feel like I lasted twice as long as Bob did the first time. So as soon as Bob fired me for being the Pied Piper, I kind of, I had a house in Fort Lauderdale. Didn't have a company name. I didn't have any employees. I didn't have any clients. And I just was optimistic. I just was generally just optimistic about the potential because I knew I had been doing it for 10 years for other people. But I thought that it would be, a slam dunk, and it wasn't quite that. But if I might, during that time, it was actually a super challenging time for us as a family. Katie was diagnosed with cancer about 2 months after I quit my job, or after Bob let me go, and I started 40 North. And it was really one of those moments where, I was partnered with this human who was teaching me the power of perseverance and strength, just like in real time. Doctors wanted to, it was a thyroid cancer, and so they wanted to have surgery immediately. And that was in November or December. And Katie basically said, we're going to wait until this baby goes full term, and then then you guys can wheel me from the birthing unit over to the cancer wing. Well, they didn't quite do that. It was only 2 weeks from giving birth to actually having surgery. And just, by that time, my company was actually taking off. I was spending weeks at a time in the Middle East working. And it was, Katie had iodine radioactive therapy, so she couldn't actually hold her baby. And so, it was going through that crucible with her, honestly, has been one of those things in the last 17 years of business that is just, I think about, having a tough day or a presentation doesn't go well or whatever. I think back to those times and thinking, this is a piece of cake. Because that was real difficult times for everybody,
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing story.
Yeah.
To lighten things up here, I do want a comment has been come in from Bryant. He says, John Galloway and Jeff Phillips, two of Kansas City's finest business leaders. If you can see that on the screen.
Well, that's from one of my favorite people in Kansas City. So that's kind of him to say that.
Yes.
It really is.
Great guy.
One of the questions, Jason, not to, you had asked me, we had talked about these projects that we work on, and I mentioned that I was in the Middle East. That was and still is kind of the case. I think 80% of our work is in other countries. We've been fortunate to team up with some really kind of amazing designers in Kansas City, guys that own our architectural practices. There's some really talented interior architects, property developers, real estate developers. So our local work is picking up, but as Jeff said in the intro, most of our work's overseas, and that's just really through kind of word of mouth, I think.
Tell us about that, because I think that's interesting. how you kind of have gone international. I know that your former company did a lot of work in overseas, but touch on that, and then also touch on where you're located, because I understand you're in a rural part of Kansas City, correct?
Yeah, we moved from Florida. We bought a farm. I drew a circle around the Kansas City airport, and I told her, I go, I'm working a crazy person, and I said, we drew the circle. I said, just give me a farm town, like find a Joaquini within that circle around the Kansas City airport. Within 30 minutes. I think at first it was like an hour, but then it changed to 30 minutes. And she was all over the place. She was over in Kansas. She was in Lexington. We were looking for 40 acres. We were looking for an old house, good school, and kind of within, driving distance of the airport. And she found Weston. And so she found this 40-acre chunk out here. And she had been here a couple times with my brothers and had seen the property. And at that time, this building that we're in now, this milk carton, didn't exist. But, I came out, I looked at it. I was really excited about the idea of moving back to closer to home. This is about as close to Joaquini as I could get at the time. But yeah, so she found this place, and I met one of these local ranchers who has adjoining property to us. And, he was just like this, he's a Western Kansas guy, he's just a farmer. And he's still one of my friends, and a great guy. And I've gotten to know he and the other neighbors over 15 years. But, I told Katie, I go, the house is okay, the land's great, but these ranchers, these farmers are great. So yeah, I'm all in. We moved here and built this building out here as my kind of first office and kind of headquarters. And we've got an office in the Livestock Exchange building as well. But we've been out here for 15 years. Moved here about a year and a half, or almost 2 years after I started the company, and we love it out here. It's really don't really have any neighbors, and it's really just kind of beautiful being connected to nature, and it's a real privilege. It's been great. About the work,
tell us a little bit about your company.
Well, we are a landscape architecture and hospitality design company. It's not, it's tough. It's a lot of the work we do is working with hotels or with property developers who have hotel operators that run their properties. We've been really fortunate to work with some of the best luxury hospitality people in the world. We've done hotels for Four Seasons, Manor and Oriental, One and Only Resorts, Atlantis, the brand Atlantis, the big resorts, which is actually a company, a resort company that we started working, or that I started working for in 1996 at EDSA. But it's amazing. You work with these hotel developers and these property developers, and everybody has their own way of doing things. And for the first 10 years of my career, I felt like I was getting a PhD in hotel design because I would go to these meetings where you'd have all these incredible to solve very complex problems. And as a guy who really never went anywhere outside, I thought the Holodome in Hayes was a resort growing up, that was fancy. And so I really didn't know what a hotel was. I really didn't have any experience designing resorts or hotels. And so that's all come through experience. But, got a chance to work for this iconic guy named Saul Kersner for 10 years or 15 years. He's since passed, but he started the One and Only Resort Hotel brand. He started Atlantis. Before that, he was this kind of a casino and resort developer from South Africa. It was just kind of this legendary gaming personality. And, for 10 years or 15 before he passed, I had a front seat at the table with a lot of other people who got to not only present ideas to him, but more importantly, learn from a guy like that. I remember, I was 25 years old on a job site in the Bahamas. And this guy at the time, I think Saul was like 58. And he was out there like a pharaoh on this job site, pointing at people and ordering people around. And he was the guy he was the top of the pyramid. And he had so much energy. I just remember just going, man, I need to pick up my game. Because if this guy's out here at 60 years old and just lapping everybody, I need to pick up my game. And so that was a real privilege to get to learn from him. About the work, like I said, 80% of our work's overseas. Right now, we've got about 20, maybe 22 projects on the boards, maybe half a dozen in Kansas City, Springfield, Bentonville, and then the rest are, we're designing resorts in Dubai, a couple of big projects. We're designing or hotels under construction that we designed in Tunisia, on the Mediterranean coast there in Tunisia and North Africa. We project in Egypt, working on a Mandarin Oriental in Grand Cayman. It's fun. It's interesting. It keeps things kind of lively. Working on so many different things at one time, and just kind of doing different types of things. In 1 minute we'll be, trying to conceptualize from a very high level concept master plan for a $1 billion development, and then next hour working with a local contractor or client on a specific detail for their house or something. So it's fun to kind of dip your hands in lots of different things.
You are the first person I met in Kansas City that's doing 80% international.
Well, when I moved to Kansas City, or the Kansas City area 15 years ago, I've got friends and family in town. It's one of the primary reasons why we moved back here. But really, it took a few years for us to, I think, get our real first project. And we don't market. We don't really go out and seek projects. We don't enter into local RFPs. Really, it's mostly word of mouth. And architects we've worked with who we've created some really great places with, who kind of reach out when they have a project that they think would be a good fit.
That's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about, John. It feels like, I'm not an architect, I'm a big fan, but it feels like people have changed or evolved their design to where incorporate the outside as part of the experience, or an expectation that they're actually going to, the residents are going to spend a lot of time outside. And so has there been an evolution in how the landscape design has interacted with the architects on projects?
Well, that's a low question. A little bit. Kansas City architects are a very particular breed of architect, and that's a discussion for another time. But I will say that, think about the world we live in now, where it's this Instagram, moment where everybody is, stylizing and kind of creating these experiences that are, like you said, there are these indoor, outdoor experiences, and people who, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, if you really wanted to look at great examples of work within your profession, you had to go to the library or to Barnes and Noble or Borders and get a magazine of, hotel design or something. And now, there's so many different platforms and so many people sharing ideas and sharing information, stealing ideas and stealing information. There's so much of that. There's so much cross-pollination between architecture and interior design and landscape design that, I think it's probably a challenge for these universities, to try and keep people within this lane. For the last 50 years, I read this book a few years ago where I think it was called Shop Class for Soulcraft was the name of it, and it was really about how for the last 50 years we've all been kind of programmed: go to college, white collar job, and you've got to learn computers, you got to sit at a desk and do all these different things, and you have to kind of specialize and be this thing, when I think that we're actually getting back and trying to, I've always tried to embrace that pioneer spirit where, I don't really like to be boxed in and say, you're this or that. I think that if you look back at our great grandparents and our great great grandparents, people who actually homesteaded Kansas and Oklahoma and Missouri, I think they were able to do so many things. They might have specialized in one thing that was the thing they did to make money primarily, but they were always working. They always had side hustles. You weren't just a blacksmith. You were also a rancher and a farmer and a poultry expert and they had all these different things. So I like to do lots of different things. And I think that thankfully we're kind of getting back towards that where, you can, just because you're a landscape designer or a landscape architect doesn't mean that you don't have ideas about architecture or hospitality or architect. I think a lot of there are some architects in Kansas City who are better landscape designers than landscape architects that I know. I think that's cool, and I think that's great. And I think the more we can break all of those barriers down, I think, and the labeling of everything, I'm all for it. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
John Galloway, 40 North. Website is 40northdesign.com. Talk about like the international projects, and you said there's mostly referrals, right? So do you go to trade shows? Like,
Hell no.
Did you used to go to
No,
those?
never. I've never.
I can see you at a booth, man. That just that's your
national
style.
conventions.
So Four Seasons in Bahamas says John Galloway, 40 North, did a great job. They tell their friends in Tunisia. Like, how does that happen where they're referring you to these other countries and other hotels and other?
I think it's more like, I think that, think about this process, this design process where you're getting to work with really smart, passionate people, creating beautiful places for people. And I've always taken the position, it's supposed to be fun. It really is supposed to be fun. And it is fun, and it's fun to solve problems. And I think that, part of the joy for me is the boxing match between consultants and the owner and the developer and the money people. And I just like the process of creating and solving these problems for people. I said earlier that I had a chance to work, at EDSA and really learn the trade. But, a lot of it is, getting out there and doing the travel. And, in 2001, I was invited to be a part of a team, a USAID team, which was the United States Agency for International Development. And we got to work on a USAID project in Morocco. And I think my boss was looking for somebody to go to Morocco for 2 weeks and kind of rough it a little bit and be a part of this project. And so I kind of, I'm somewhere dangerous, kind of out of the way. I would definitely love to go do that. And when I went and did that, that was my first Middle East trip. That was in April of 2001, before 9/11. And I just fell in love. I fell in love with all of it, the people, the culture, the food, the extreme weather, which really reminded me of Western Kansas. I just loved it, and was hooked. And so from 2001 on, I really made the Middle East kind of my priority and kind of my sphere of influence, if you will. And it's been fantastic.
Wow, that's amazing. And so today, with communications, with Zoom, with the things that you have to do, do you travel a lot less than you used to?
Yeah, thankfully I do. And it's not only, it's a combination of factors. I think the technology is part of it. And, obviously because of COVID and everybody being so disconnected physically, it required all these new platforms to connect everybody digitally or however you want to call it. But also, I think that's part of it. I think part of it is as I get older and realize that the people that work for me need to grow as designers and as human beings. So I really, if there's an opportunity for the younger people in my company to go and travel and do that and make some mistakes and learn from that, then I'm all for that. I think that's great. And over the last couple of years, as I get older, I just turned 50. I'm starting to wear like compression socks on these planes now, and I don't, and it's harder to travel now than it ever was. It used to be this kind of easy breezy thing with, business lounges and, cheap street food, and maybe there's still that, but it's travel's definitely changed for sure.
Yeah, you're going far, far away too. If you're going
I think I've probably been in Dubai anywhere more than anywhere as far as outside of where I am. I started working there in 2001, and I think I've probably made my carbon footprint is ridiculous because I think it's maybe 110 round trips to Dubai over the last 21, 22 years. It used to be half a dozen or 9 times a year, maybe 10. And I kind of cut that back to three or 4. And I try and do 2 when I'm there. It's, Dubai is this, Dubai is not my favorite place, but I just know it probably better than most places. It's one of those places where there's a palpable buzz in that town, where it's a living organism. It doesn't stop growing. It really, it's an incredible place. it's really all about business. I think, here in the States, we see all this glitz and glamour and the show and the Burj Khalifa, the tallest tower, and the show, the Real Housewives of Dubai and all of that stuff. But it's really an amazing place. And it's a place that, I go back every 3 months for work, and it's changed. It really is physically changed. And we've got 2 projects under construction there. So, one of them is a project that we pitched in August of 2014. On some of these big projects, I collaborate with one of my best friends in Kansas City. His name is Sean Sims. He runs a landscape architecture company, SKS Studio. And Sean and I have been friends since he was 18 and I was 19. And what's great is we both kind of left EDSA at the same time, started new companies, and now we have the opportunity of kind of controlling our own world. But it's really fun to kind of work with him sometimes, and because our skill sets are complementary, and he's been a big part of the work in Dubai over the last 7-8 years too. So it's been great.
Mm-hmm.
So John, not only has the ability to do remote stuff impacted how you work with clients, but can you talk about what that's meant for your staff and how you guys work together? I would think that would be hard as creatives to kind of collaborate virtually.
It's not, because I've been having to work on projects 8,000-9,000 miles away since day one. So, if I could communicate ideas to people on the other side of the world using, Federal Express, sending actual drawings across the world, or fax machines, or, all of that, then certainly with all these platforms, it should be easier. There's so many amazing software platforms now to allow not only designers and creatives to collaborate online through the cloud, but also, unfortunately, contractors and quantity surveyors and cost estimators, where we're all working on a project in real time on a model, on a Revit model that changes in real time as people all around the world work. It's actually incredible to kind of look back on 25 years and see how things have changed so much. Like I said, most of our projects are 8, 9, 10 hours ahead of us. So we have early morning and late night Zoom calls. I've been on 3 Zooms already today. We had one that started at 7, one at 8:30. Both of them were with clients in Dubai and Saudi Arabia, and and then there were operators in London, operators in Hong Kong, architects in London, New York, and it's incredible. I'm wondering what the next iteration of it's going to be. I'm assuming that at some point I'll be able to put on just a pair of VR headphones or iPhones or whatever and do that. But for now, I'm an analog guy. I like to use pencils and pens and paper and.
John, what's the reaction like when you jump on from northern Kansas City?
You know what? There's
you're mentioning very cosmopolitan big cities there, Hong Kong, London.
I'll be honest with you, there's not a lot of chit chat. It's pretty much let's get to it. But to be honest with you, I've worked with most of these people before. They know the story. We've gone out, we've had the drinks, we've told the stories. We live on this acreage with cattle, and it's kind of like this idyllic. I can tell a story. I mean, I can definitely sell the vibe out here. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's anything. I think, Kansas City and rural America, these second cities are, I think we're going to see a real resurgence. And we already have the last 5-10 years, but like Kansas City up until, this World Cup quarterfinal match, that's going to be incredible. I see tremendous growth in Kansas City and potential, and you can just driving around, you can kind of feel it. So I think Kansas City people get on these calls with all these people in Dubai and London, and it's just like anywhere else. I had a client one time, we were in a meeting, and I was pitching a really big idea to a lot of important people, and the client, who's an Emirati CEO guy, he said in front of 200 people that he kind of did what Jeff did, kind of teed it up and was like, John is this guy who, you see the work and it feels like it's done by a team of 40 people in New York City. In reality, it's John and a handful of guys working out of some farm in the middle of nowhere. And I love that. I love that because, out here, I'm looking at it out to the east right now. It's where I feel most creative. I think it's a place where I know that if I've got, or like I said, early morning Zoom calls or a sudden moment of inspiration hits me, I can go out here, turn everything on and be working within a minute or two of being in the farmhouse. So yeah, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
It really is great.
Talk about the importance of nature, of outdoors, of connecting people to their environments and your development projects you work on, landscaping. Why is that so important nowadays?
Well, I mean, because look at this, what we're doing right now. We're sitting here, all three of us, indoors, windows closed, looking at screens. And I think that obviously the last 2 years have changed the way people work, not just in Kansas City, but everywhere. And I think, one of our core values from day one has been to try and connect people to nature. My daughter, Mimi, a couple years ago said to me, she goes, "Dad, what I love about you is that you come from this place, Trego County, Kansas. You come from this place with no trees, and yet you work on all these projects where trees are such a big part of your job." And I thought that was interesting. But yeah, important to connect people to nature. I think it's important. That's why we raise these girls out here on this farm to get out and kind of be in space a little bit and kind of be out in the wild and try and recreate that wilderness. I think it's kind of a oxymoron a little bit. Some of those spaces that we create for people, these luxury hospitality environments, are these really tightly manicured, perfectly detailed, formal, modern experiences. And my favorite resort is out in Western Kansas, out in a pasture with little blue stem grass and wind coming about 30 miles an hour at my face. And so I think that what we try and do is kind of bring a little bit of that wildness or that wilderness, kind of bring it to these projects. So I don't know.
You mentioned two different kinds of places, right? I mean, you're talking about the Four Seasons and all these Atlantis and then Western Kansas.
Well, but I have to be honest with you. There have been times in the Middle East, specifically Egypt, rural Egypt, where I've been there a lot and worked there a lot, and it's an amazing culture, people, landscape. But it's one of these things where in 2018 I was living there working on a project, and we were with these nursery guys and looking at these minarets, right? The towers that are at each mosque, and in the pre-dawn and dawn hours, I really felt like I was in Western Kansas with the white grain elevators. Saarinen, the architect, was the guy who said that those white concrete grain elevators spaced every 10 miles in Western Kansas were the cathedrals of the plains. And I really feel like he was dead on about that. But I felt like you've got there's just some similarities between where I grew up and people in Western Kansas and people in these rural parts of the Middle East. There's just I think part of it is the weather. It's got these extreme weather things that kind of I don't want to say beat down their emotions, but they definitely change your outlook on things. It's just as this kind of constant thing you're having to deal with. But also, like I said earlier, people, they may seem on the surface that these places are so different. I mean, my dad thought that when I was going to the Middle East, it was, bombed out cars and, these really angry people and all these things. And I think part of that's the media. In 20 years of travel over there, I've never had any experiences that I would categorize as unpleasant or dangerous. And what I realized is that, like I said, they may appear geographically different, but I think people want the same thing. They want fresh food. They want clean water. They want their kids to go and learn a few things. They want kindness and happiness, and so there's similarities there. And I really like experiencing both cultures to try and kind of, I don't know, bridge it a little bit, be a cultural ambassador of sorts.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Where's one place you haven't worked that you want to work? or do a project in?
One place that I would, there's some places in northern Canada, up in like Nova Scotia and some of the barrier islands up there in the Northeast, where there's a couple of architects that I admire, and there's a guy named Todd Saunders who's done some projects up there, and some other architects from that part of the country. I just feel like that is a place. It's kind of extreme, you know. It's not so much about trees and lush luxury. It's more about trying to create human space within an inhospitable environment, you know, trying to carve out a little bit of humanity in a place that the weather is really kind of beating you down a little bit sometimes. And that may be a weird answer, but I'd like to try that out. You know, somebody asked me a couple of years ago where the same question, and I don't know if I had had a few cocktails, but I said Mars. You know, I would love to go try and do something like Mars. I think that would be fun and certainly a challenge. But I don't know.
Well, Matt Damon was successful in growing potatoes, so
No, right?
maybe something would grow out there. Yeah.
Poor guy from Boston, if he can do it, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big deal, right?
Hey, John, maybe this isn't, you know, you always hear business challenges of how do I get my business to scale? And maybe that's not an issue that you face, but I'm specifically interested whenever you talk about creatives, because it's like the thing that makes that company valuable is the ideas rolling around in your head.
Right.
How do you scale? How do you build a business around an individual or a creative?
Well, you know, I guess
That's a great question, Jeff.
it is a good question, and I can only speak from my own personal point of view, right? I would say it's this. You know, when I was a kid, when I was 6 years old, I got to see Christo's wrapped walkways project at Loose Park, where he covered the whole park, all the walkways in this saffron colored fabric, right? And so, you know, as a kid, you see that, and it just like, you know, I had so many questions, and I still do. And then over my 50 years of life, I was able to see two more of his projects. One, I got to see them, and this isn't directly what you asked, but it's how I'm going to answer it. I got to see this other floating mastaba project at Hyde Park. And then just this last in 21 October, some friends and Katie and I, we all went and saw the wrapped Arc de Triomphe in Paris. And it's one of these things where this one guy and his wife, Jean-Claude, so Christo and Jean-Claude, they were able to manifest ideas that they had through discussions between themselves and nobody else. And through art, through drawing, and through sheer will, they, over a 60-year career, were able to conceptualize ideas that really had no use in the world, but they could conceptualize them, and then they would, through their own efforts and a lot of other efforts of other people, but they would self-finance and actually get these projects built just for the power of art. Just to create something that would exist only for a short amount of time and then be gone forever and only evidenced through drawings and photographs. And so I guess way I'd answer your question, Jeff, is that anything is possible. One of the questions you had asked earlier, Jason, in the email, the prep email, was, what's a word that describes you? And, you know, I thought about that. I've never thought about that. But I think idealist, to be an idealist, that is the word that I would strive to try and emulate, because it's not so much about ideas or principles over practicality, but it's more about an optimism about that anything is possible, and I really believe that. I think more improbable things that have happened than some kid from Western Kansas being a semi-successful, landscape designer or whatever. I think it's more about having a passion for life. I've actually been through a couple of things in my life where I've almost died, literally. I had a heart condition, when I was 28 that I got while traveling. And, I think going through that is stuff that just gets me up in the morning, Jeff, you mentioned earlier the love of family, right? Family is everything to me, and not only my kids and my wife and my immediate family, brothers and their kids, but people that I've never met, great grandfathers and grandmothers that still inspire me in the work that I do.
John, how did you have to scale to accomplish all these clients? Because could you have done this on your own, or did you have to build a team?
Well, I mean, that's a loaded question. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I had employees for the first 3 years.
Yeah.
And I had a guy, and then I had 2 guys, and then I was back down to no guys in 2011. So it's been, it's the thing about it is, unless you started a company, you have no idea what you're in for. It is a pride swallowing siege. And, of course, I've been lucky enough to have really great mentors, great clients. I have 3 guys that work for me in Kansas City that are probably the 3 of the most talented, hardworking guys that I've had in my 17-year company existence. And so, of course, we're able to, they have skill sets that I don't have. And I think, one of the guys has been with me for, I think, 8 years, going on 9 now, and through a lot of ups and downs and a lot of projects. And he's been working on, primarily one project for his entire career out of K-State. And I think that's incredible. So, it's called the Royal Atlantis in Dubai, and it's the largest, most expensive hotel about to open on the planet right now. And Sean Sims from SKS and ourselves and literally thousands of other people have been working and toiling to get this thing open through COVID and everything. So, it does take a lot of people, a lot of encouragement from family and friends. Fred Colson's a buddy of mine who, when Katie told me she was pregnant and I really needed to fulfill this itch of starting my own thing, but was scared about jumping into the waters. Fred was this guy who just said, Johnny, just do it. You can't, there's no other choice. You've got to do it. And he was right. And after 17 years of being my own boss, or at least I think I'm the boss. Yeah, it's
and you emphasize having fun, which I think is important, and being creative and independent and honest and profitable are kind of your mantras of your business.
Yeah, look, you have to have fun. I mean, look, we have one shot at this thing. That is it. I know a lot of people have a lot of different belief systems, but after kind of going through my health scares and seeing these 3 beautiful daughters of mine grow up and be their own human beings, and have confidence and their own creative spirits within inside of them. Yeah, I think you have to have fun. I think you've got to be honest. I'm honest to a fault. I'm sure there's a lot of projects that we don't get just because sometimes things get a little sideways. Sometimes these projects, there are once every couple of months there's an issue where we have a Zoom with an architect or somebody, and when people believe in what they're doing, personalities can clash. So, but
Yeah.
you kind of stay true to yourself, though, I believe.
You said you have about 22 active projects right now?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we
Wow.
were almost 21, almost got fired last week on a local project. So
it's hard when the local project at the house is like competing with the Royal Atlantis in Dubai.
You know what? It's a pleasure because the people here are so much nicer, and not so much the people in that part of the world, but when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, suddenly the people in the room get a lot more serious, and they have a lot firmer positions on where they need to be. And sometimes that's hard, and they don't care if you've got sick staff or can't staff it, or they move the deadline up or anything. And I think that working locally in Kansas City allows us also to see the work get built. I can't think of many projects in 20. I guess I've been doing this 25 years. I can't think of many projects where I've gone back to and looked around and swam in a pool or basked in the glory of being the guy that could think of this stuff, because that's not really why I'm here. I'm here to solve problems. We don't submit projects for awards or any of that sort of stuff because none of that stuff matters. It really is about the work. It really is about getting some ideas built, and at the end of the day, getting better as a human being and as a designer. I think those are like core values.
As we close, Jeff, because we could talk for hours with John. I know he's a busy man. What are things you'd like to see more of in Kansas City moving forward as we continue to grow as a city? As someone who's traveled essentially all around the world and has seen so many different cultures, what can we be doing to improve our city and the beauty of it, and and continue to move it forward?
Well, I think first and foremost, Kansas City is already a great city, and it's it's been, when we first moved here, we moved to Weston because I really wanted to keep Kansas City at like arm's length a little bit. Not only just the city, and everybody kind of had their established whatever, but also to kind of just be a little bit different. But it's what's amazing is I think about this World Cup match coming up. The Chiefs, as much as I hate to say it, are such an amazing football team. I'm a Broncos fan. Let's ride. But I think Kansas City has such a vibrant art community, a vibrant food community. I think that I feel like things are becoming more and more inclusive of all types of people, which I love to see. I think that Kansas City has it's a great city in its own right now, but it's only
Where's the first place you take someone, John, if they come from overseas to Kansas City to meet with you?
Where I go to, I probably go to the Ship, and I probably have a Paloma at the Ship, because that place is one of those out of body experiences where it's the last thing you expect to find in a warehouse in the West Bottoms. But I think that place is great. Kansas City is great, and it got put on really great footing 100 years ago with guys like Kessler and these visionary landscape architects who kind of they laid out the Paseo and Ward Parkway and created these amazing parks like Loose Park and Swope. And what's cool is I'm actually spending more and more time in the Hyde Park neighborhood, and I love it. I kind of like being in Midtown. I like there's so much activity on Troost and small mom and pop places and places that are kind of popping up that I didn't know existed. And so my earlier standoffish days are kind of changing, and as my girls go to high school in KC, we're embracing KC, and I'm really kind of enjoying meeting new people and doing new stuff. So it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have anything to add as we close? I have so many more questions I could ask John, but we'll have to have a drink or something at some point at the Ship to go.
I thought we were going to do like a part 2. This is like a series deal.
Yeah. We can do that. We can do that. We'll do that when you're in one of your.
I'll ask anybody.
The 10-episode Netflix series right here.
The Triple J show, Jason, Jeff, and John. I like it.
I love it, John. You have a lot of things to say.
Oh, no.
John Galloway, 40 North. The website is 40northdesign.com. Amazing website with hundreds of different projects, from residential to resorts to hotels to corporate. You've worked on all kinds of different things all throughout the world. It's pretty fascinating to talk to you about your travels and what you've learned. If real briefly before we sign off today, give us some of your best advice for business owners or those who some of the things you've learned, just a handful of things you want to share before we sign off today on best advice that has helped you in your business.
I think part of it is just being yourself, to be honest with you, and asking for help when you don't have the answers. Jeff has been a really great resource to me, not, in some ways in personal finances and stuff, but he's just one of those guys who is like, I feel like I can trust what he's saying, and I know he's going to tell me the truth, and it may not be what I want to hear, but it's what I need to hear. And luckily I've got a few people in Kansas City, most of all my wife, Katie, who's really an amazing sounding board, but I've got some really, and my kids, I have to say that these are my 3 favorite people on the planet. And I ask my girls very adult questions and really want their honest opinion, because they are the future, and they are definitely more connected into pop culture, than I am. But, I think asking for help, asking questions, I think being yourself, I think the work that we do stems from a lot of it is, like I said earlier, is trying to create that wilderness, trying to create that little bit of wild into everything, as far as things being a little bit untamed. And I think that comes from me being from Western Kansas. But I think, we try, and these projects we work on, we really are trying to solve the problems that the client has, and try and be pragmatic in our approach to materiality and ideas, and we're not trying to create something that's, we can get an award and talk about it on Instagram. It's really, how can we solve your problems? And most of the time that works out pretty good. So.
Well, John, thanks for coming on the show today. Jeff, as always, banklandmark.com is his website, Landmark National Bank. Thank you for connecting us to John Galloway in 40 North. We'll have to do it again in one of our series here, guys, but I appreciate your time today, and I appreciate all those who have joined us today on the live stream on YouTube or on my social media, or of course on Apple Podcasts and on our podcast networks. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Grill Nation Show. We will see you again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Jason. Jeff. Cheers, man.
Thanks, you.
John. Bye, guys.